You are listening to the Hero's Journey podcast. I'm Dan Zarzana.
And I'm Jeff Garvin.
Let the journey begin. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Hero's Journey podcast, where we discuss your favorite stories through the lens of Joseph Campbell's monomyth, as well as Christopher Vogler's modern cinema-focused adaptation as presented in his book, The Writer's Journey.
Aside from the handful of books we've discussed during the life of the podcast, most of our subjects have been films. This time, though, we decided to turn our attention to television. Traditionally, pilot season has been January through April. So this April, and by the way, pilot season is like when the shows are being cast before they're produced for the fall season. So this April, we're looking at one of 3 high-profile television pilots selected by you, our listeners.
Third place, with 15% of the vote, went to the political drama The West Wing, created by Aaron Sorkin. Sorkin was also the writer of the subject of our 5th episode, the Rob Reiner film, The American President.
I mean, I love both other shows, but I was really hoping West Wing would win.
I know you're a huge fan. You and your wife listened to every single episode of the West Wing Weekly podcast.
Yeah. Well, that's partially what inspired this podcast in many ways, was the West Wing Weekly.
True. And for people who aren't aware, Jeff and I attended a podcasting 101 seminar hosted by Rishikesh Hirway, who is the creator of many critically acclaimed podcasts, including the West Wing Weekly and, what's his music one?
Song Exploder,
yes. So, yeah, Rishikesh Hirway is actually, he is one of our mentors.
Yeah, so we're disappointed. I'm disappointed in you, listeners, for having chosen the wrong one. But whatever, you're the boss.
Second place went to Breaking Bad with 25% of the vote. I think my parents really wanted this one to win.
I'm surprised it didn't.
Breaking Bad was created by Vince Gilligan and began airing on the AMC channel in 2008 during an era of prestige cable television that continues today and has bled over into streaming. Vince Gilligan was also a staff writer on our first place finisher, The X-Files, created by Chris Carter, which earned a majority 60% of the vote.
The X-Files debuted on Fox on September 10, 1993. Streaming services were still over a decade away. This was before you could even pause live TV.
Right.
A feature that wasn't introduced until 1999. If you had to pee during an episode, you had to wait until the commercial break and then hope that the commercial break lasted long enough for you to finish your business, at which point you would sprint through the house, trip over the dog, push your sister aside, and dive onto your spot in the couch as the episode faded up from black. The memories.
Yeah.
The series originally ran for 9 seasons, concluding in May 2002. The show was then revitalized in 2016 for a special 6-episode season 10, which did well enough that 10 more episodes were produced and aired in 2018 as season 11. As we sit here today, Creed and Black Panther director Ryan Coogler is developing a reboot of the show with series creator Chris Carter's blessing.
I am both interested and trepidatious about that, about a reboot. I feel like, even Chris Carter himself said the reason the X-Files was as successful as it was, this was even pre-public internet. The internet existed in a more of an industrial sense, but it was not widely used by the public yet in 1993. Yeah. Conspiracy theories were not just a daily part of our lives like they are today.
Yeah. It was more intriguing.
It was more intriguing. It was more interesting. You would watch an episode of The X-Files and there would be some new monster that maybe you'd kind of heard about, but you didn't know anything about it. Like maybe the Jersey Devil, something like that.
Right.
It's going to be challenging for Coogler to come up with interesting storylines.
Yeah, like
I think in today's environment.
Government overreach and secrecy is kind of like every podcast you listen to is about that.
Yes. Yeah, there weren't podcasts yet either. And, back then podcasts were called AM radio. And
boy.
You couldn't just listen to whatever you wanted. You had to wait for that particular date and time to listen to your favorite host's conspiracy theories at 1 a.m.
Art Bell at 1 a.m. on KFI,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
He was the spooky guy.
Uh-huh. All right. The X-Files launched the careers of Gillian Anderson as Dr. Dana Scully and David Duchovny as Agent Fox Mulder. We didn't know who these folks were until the X-Files came along, and then bam, international superstars.
Yeah.
Throughout its history, the show was nominated for 62 Primetime Emmy Awards, 16 of which it won. Most of those were for categories like effects, art direction, makeup, sound editing. I think Mark Snow won one for his score.
I think so.
And I don't mention it in this way to diminish the achievement of those winners. I was just surprised to see that the performers and the show creator didn't win any Emmys, except for Gillian Anderson's single 1997 award for Best Actress in a Drama Series.
And there's footage of Gillian Anderson right after she accepts the award. She's backstage, and you can see her cursing because she forgot to thank David Duchovny in her acceptance speech. It's funny that you mentioned all the technical awards. This show had a big impact on the way television looked. If you hate shows that are shot too dark that you can barely see what's happening, you have the X-Files to thank for introducing the super dark noir cinematography. In addition to its flagship series, The X-Files also spawned two feature films, 1998's X-Files Fight the Future and 2008's The X-Files I Want to Believe, several novels, video games, and two spin-off television series, including The Lone Gunman, which I really enjoyed, and which, at the end of the series, they actually addressed the cliffhanger ending of the original series, which I thought was a nice little nugget for those of us who were diehards. As of May 2002, when the original series run concluded, the franchise had earned $1 billion in revenue. Wow.
That explains, and half of that was from the primary The X-Files series. So
the other half was from selling I Want to Believe poster prints at Sam Goody.
A decent chunk of that was, I'm sure.
Yep.
So this makes sense why after the original 5-season contract to which Chris Carter, the series creator, David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson were all signed to, after that 5-year contract expired and Chris Carter said, I want to make a movie now, Fox said, no, you're coming back and you're making more TV.
Oof.
And the movie Fight the Future, which came out in 98, was supposed to be kind of a wrap-up series of films that would kind of end the story. That was Chris Carter's original plan. And Fox said, no, we want you to make more television, so this movie you're making has to be a bridge between season 5 and season 6. So Carter had to write a feature film script that would make sense to people who hadn't seen the show, and season 6 had to make sense to people who saw the movie, but also season 6 had to make sense to people who only saw the show and didn't see the movie.
That is absolutely an impossible writing assignment.
I can't even imagine.
But, the show had a lasting impact on Fox because they've basically been peddling conspiracy theories ever since.
Man, there's a reason people didn't pick the West Wing, because they didn't want you to get political.
I mean...
All right, Jeff, it's time to watch The X-Files with no lights on. We're Surly Podcast. I hope the smoking man's in this one. This is the hero's journey of The X-Files pilot episode.
That was a deep, bare-naked ladies, French grammar joke. I don't even know what to say. I'm floored. Thank you for listening to the Hero's Journey podcast.
We'll see you next week.
The hero's journey always begins with the ordinary world. Our world of common day, where we see our main character or characters in their status quo normal life. This show begins with a title that immediately grabs our attention. The following story is inspired by actual documented accounts. I did not do any research to find out if that was true, and I don't care because what it does is immediately hooks you into believing and wondering what is true and what is not, which is the whole theme of the show.
Yes.
So now you're like, oh, is this real? What is it? I gotta watch this. TV shows often begin with teasers. In this one, we get a young woman in a nightgown, and she's running through the forest when she trips and falls, and suddenly a bright light rises up over this ridge, and a shadowy male figure approaches. A whirlwind of leaves kicks up, and the male figure approaches and glows white, and we dissolve to Column National Forest, Northwest Oregon. Now, this is the teaser, which has to introduce not necessarily the plot of the episode, but it has to be a gripping opening event, and it has to set the tone for the whole show. So we immediately know this is about paranormal phenomenon, and we're not sure what just happened, but we hope we're going to find out. We're back at the same location, only now it's a crime scene, and the girl is dead and has two strange, like mole-looking bumpy marks on her back. And the coroner turns her over, and the sheriff immediately recognizes her as Karen Swenson, a classmate of his son's. And the coroner says, would that be the class of 89? It's happening again. So we immediately know this is part of a chain of events that we're being dropped into.
Yeah.
And then in a shot close to the end of that sequence, we see that Karen Swenson has like a trail of blood running from her nose. And that becomes a visual motif and a plot thing that happens later. We're not done with Ordinary World, but this really sets up the tone of the show and the world we're about to enter, which is the world of paranormal experiences and unexplained phenomenon and investigations. All of that in the first couple of minutes of the show. As I was beginning to watch this show, my memory of it was that Mulder was the hero. And as I'm watching this show, I'm like, no, it's not. And obviously, after I watched it and did a bunch of research and reading, I was like, oh, of course, Scully's the hero. But thinking about it when I first watched the series, I identified more with Mulder. And obviously that we're meant to identify with Scully. She's the skeptic. She's the voice of reason. She's the one who's putting forth all of our reservations. She does the skepticism work, and we can just want to believe. So in a very Clarice Starling way, our hero presents herself at the front desk as Agent Dana Scully of the FBI and sees herself to an office full of older white men, including one mysterious man leaning against a filing cabinet. Remember those? Smoking a cigarette. At several key points in the scene, Scully and Smoking Man have weird, uncomfortable eye contact, which is going to tie into a tidbit for later. This show is so deep.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten they set him up in the very first episode.
Right.
Dan, you know my favorite kind of exposition is when two characters have a conversation and each of them says things that the other person already knows. I'm so glad I saw this show before I went to film school. So during this conversation, we learned that Agent Dana Scully is a recent med school graduate who eschewed practicing medicine to join the FBI. She was recruited to join the FBI, and she thought it might be an opportunity to distinguish herself. She tells us about another agent named Fox Mulder.
Are you familiar with an agent named Fox Mulder?
He's an Oxford-educated psychologist who wrote a monograph on serial killers and the occult that helped catch Monty Props in 1988. Generally thought of as the best analyst in the violent crime section. He had a nickname at the academy. Spooky Mulder.
Now, there are a lot of Silence of the Lambs parallels here, and maybe it's just because we just covered the movie, but I was like, wow, there's a lot here, and that is intentional. He has a reputation for being a bit eccentric, and he has become obsessed with an unassigned project outside the Bureau mainstream called the X-Files, a collection of cases dealing with unexplained phenomena. Dan, that sets up our Ordinary World.
The second segment of the hero's journey is the call to adventure. The hero is presented with a challenge, rendering them unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. So Chief Blevins, the man behind the desk, says,
"The reason you're here, Agent Scully, is we want you to assist Mulder on these X-Files. You will write field reports on your activities, along with your observations on the validity of the work."
That is it. Mm-hmm. We've got a 45-minute television program. 15 seconds is devoted to the call to adventure.
It was very satisfying to watch this and go, wow, they really get to it fast. You gotta. That brings us to refusal of the call. Confronted with fear of the unknown, our hero refuses the call. Sometimes this is expressed from within the hero, sometimes from without. There's a little bit in this scene when Scully says,
Am I to understand that you want me to debunk the X-Files project, sir?
she's kind of pushing back on this assignment. She doesn't quite buy that she's supposed to assist. And Blevin says, we trust you'll make the proper scientific analysis. But the meat...
I love his non-answer answer.
Yeah, he's quite a bureaucrat, that one. The real meat of the refusal happens. Scully enters a basement office strewn with all the paraphernalia of a conspiracy hunter.
Yeah.
Blurry photographs of UFOs, maps stuck with pins, and the famous poster of a flying saucer that reads, I want to believe. This is the den of Fox Mulder. Scully introduces herself, and Mulder is like pleasantly hostile.
That's a good way to put it.
He's sort of charming and funny, but it's clear that he thinks she's been sent to spy on him. And of course, she has. Implicit in her orders, she even identifies it, debunk. So she's part of an agenda that she might not necessarily believe in, but he sees right through it. You're here to spy on me. And then in another bout of my favorite kind of expo, Mulder unpacks more of her credentials and what tells her, here's what I know about you already, because I've done my homework. And it's funny, the thing that she wrote her doctorate thesis on was Einstein's twin paradox, which is, I dove in deep. It's such a great metaphor because Einstein's twin paradox is the whole idea that if two twins are on Earth and one gets in a rocket ship and travels at relativistic speeds and comes back, the twin that stayed on Earth will be older. So the whole concept is a scientific explanation for something that seems unexplainable. So it's a great little metaphor for their relationship.
The next segment of the hero's journey is meeting with the mentor or supernatural aid. The hero receives counsel on how to operate in the special world. Continuing this scene in what you called the den of Agent Fox Mulder, Mulder shows Scully some slides related to this newest case that we, the viewer, witnessed at
Not
the
a
beginning.
PowerPoint, not swiping images on his phone. It is a analog slide. You got to plug in the projector and pull up the screen.
Bonafide projector slideshow, absolutely. We see photos of the young woman from the prologue. Scully suggests possible causes of the marks on her back. Mulder switches to another slide that shows a chemical compound, asks her if she can identify it, and then he keeps switching to other slides showing two more victims in other places across the country. And he asks Scully, do you believe in extraterrestrials? And she answers that logically she has to say no. And then gives her scientific analysis of why it is implausible that Earth has been visited by extraterrestrials. Where the mentorship comes from is in Mulder's next line. He says, conventional wisdom.
Now, when convention and science offer us no answers, might we not finally turn to the fantastic as a plausibility?
This is Mentor Mulder telling Scully that she's got to think outside the box if she's going to be successful in the X-Files.
It's also Mentor David Duchovny teaching Gillian Anderson how to say a really awkwardly written, clunky line that is much easier to read than to speak out loud. This is where he should have gotten an Emmy for that line. Might we not finally turn to the fantastic?
So Scully pushes back a bit, responds with more series of plausible answers, and Mulder then says, all right, well, we'll see you in the morning. We're leaving for the very plausible state of Oregon.
Yes.
Oregon, he says, not Oregon.
Oregon.
At 8 a.m. That is Mulder accepting Scully as a partner, at least temporarily, and that is the end of the meeting with the mentor.
This brings us to crossing the threshold. The hero must pass a barrier to enter the special world, and this represents their commitment to taking on the adventure. They're on that plane, bound for the very plausible state of Oregon, which I had written out exactly the same as you did. Mulder is asleep across an entire row of seats. Do you remember when you could fly and there might be an open row of seats? Like that was a total possibility. And you might fist bump, but it wasn't that like uncommon. And it's such a great Mulder character. He's just lying across. He's got his earbuds in. Scully is sitting across the aisle reviewing the case files like a good FBI agent. And they're about to make their descent when they hit a brutal pocket of turbulence, causing the camera to hit all sorts of Dutch angles without affecting like hair gravity. And I pick on it, but that's a total TV trope, and you don't notice it when you're watching it. But when you watch it 3 times, you're like, Scully must be wearing lots of hairspray. Anyway, Mulder, as if to acknowledge that this turbulence is somehow connected to the strange phenomena they're about to investigate, says,
This must be the place.
So the turbulence is a little bit of a barrier. And then when they hit the ground, they pass a sign that says, Welcome to Bellflower, Gateway to Fun and Recreation. They have officially crossed the boundary into the special world of this investigation.
Yeah, agreed.
I need a coffee refill, and I'm going to sprint across the room to go to the restroom before the commercial break is over. I'll see you at the Campbell Cafe. Welcome to the Campbell Cafe. Dan, what have you been listening to, watching, reading?
All kinds of stuff, but most of it I have not completed yet, so I am left with a single answer.
I'm ready.
A couple of nights ago, I finished the Judy Blume novel In the Unlikely Event.
Huh.
I remember enjoying Judy Blume's novels when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, Super Fudge. In the Unlikely Event is an adult novel, one of a handful that she has written. And unfortunately, the writing style that makes her children's novels so accessible to young readers did not grow up with her transition to adult novels.
Oh, no.
Simplistic sentence structure, pointless dialogue that causes a scene to stagnate, made this book seem like a child was trying to tell an adult story complete with tee-hee-hee dirty words.
Oh, no.
Jeff, this book includes 3 plane crashes and a scene from a girl's perspective describing her first sexual encounter, and the entire thing was just dull.
What words did she use? Was it like stiffy and squishy, or did she just put emojis in the book? Like, how did she?
That's the thing, man. There was just no substance to any of it.
Man.
I got through this book more than read this book. Fortunately, it was a fast read, but I don't recommend it.
Dan trashing one of the most beloved authors in American history. That's tough.
I bought this book brand new from Barnes & Noble in 2015, I think. So it has been sitting on my shelf for 8-9 years. And I decided one day, you know what? I just need to read this book. I used to buy books compulsively. I could not step into a bookstore and leave without something.
Bless you. We need more of you.
It was very much an illness.
Yeah.
And the year before COVID lockdown, I said, that's it. I'm not buying any more books. I'm going to read all the books that I have in my home first.
Good for you.
And I have now reached this one. And boy, did it almost make me stop.
It's funny. I have the same problem where it's not that I buy books compulsively. It's just that I buy books, I line them up, I make a TBR, and then when it comes time to pick a next book, I like, you can't tell me what to do. But I'm like, Jeff, you made you bought those books, and I'm like, no, I don't want to read those now. It's like the most childish reaction to authority, but like it's like I know that women have described the experience of going into their closet, looking at their 500 outfits, and having the experience, I have nothing to wear. That's how I feel about reading. Well, I also read a book that was very hard to get through, but I'm glad I finished it. It's called Not Forever, But For Now, and it's the latest novel by Chuck Palahniuk, author of Fight Club. If you have children, please skip forward about 4 minutes in this podcast, because this is the most effed up book I have ever read.
Whoa.
I gasped and laughed out of shock several times in the first 2 chapters. It is about, you think at the beginning of the book, it's about 2 young British boys who entrap pedophiles and then actually have sex with them and enjoy it, and then turn them into the police or kill them. And then it gets more disturbing from there until it is almost unbearably dark and disturbing. There's a quote often attributed to Banksy: art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. I found out reading this book that I am more comfortable than I thought, because I was very disturbed. So if you're in the mood to read something that will just blow your mind, I recommend it. It's short, which is good, because I had to read it in sips, because it's just like eating a bowl of nails and being like, ow, but it tastes good. Ow. Okay, that's all I got. Let's go back to the studio and dive into Act 2.
Act 2 of the hero's journey begins with the road of trials. Having crossed the first threshold, the hero meets allies, makes enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove their worthiness. So allies, Mulder and Scully are allies to each other. I didn't really see a whole lot of other ally characters yet. There will be others as the series progresses. You'll end up with characters like Director Skinner, or the lone gunman that you mentioned in the intro.
Yeah.
There are plenty of characters who are allies to Mulder and Scully, but in the pilot, they're really just trying to focus on these 2 main characters, establishing their relationship.
I had 2 minor characters that I couldn't find a reason to put them as enemies or shapeshifters, and that was Teresa Nemen, the daughter of the medical examiner. She wants to help. She's giving them information until she's stopped.
Yep.
And then the other minor character is Dr. Glass, Ray Soames' psychiatrist, one of the victims' psychiatrists, who provides them with valuable information that leads them down the road to achieving their goal. He doesn't try to obstruct them at all, the way most of the characters in this town are trying to prevent Scully and Mulder.
Yeah. Obfuscate.
Oh, I love that word.
Enemies, the sheriff. Well, I guess I'd call them shapeshifters, really, because, the sheriff, the medical examiner, they're all people that are supposed to be helpful. But as you just said, everybody in this town is trying to get in the way and prevent Mulder and Scully from continuing this investigation.
Yeah, I had the Emmy and the detective as enemies. Detective Miles really only turns around at the end of the episode, and it's for his purposes, not for theirs. So
yes. Test number 1. Scully and Mulder discuss the case file. They're in the car driving toward Bellflower.
Which, by the way, is a joke on Bellflower, which is where Chris Carter grew up.
Correct.
Free tidbit there for you.
Free tidbit. And Scully notices that the FBI has already investigated this case years ago. There were 3 bodies found. Agents came to town, couldn't find anything, probably because the detective and the medical examiner were getting in their way. But these 2 agents were not as tenacious as Mulder and Scully are about to be. And so they said, we can't find anything. We're going to reclassify the case and dump it in the X-Files, where it will hopefully rot, until Mulder dug it up a week ago. Scully also then reveals that the first 3 medical reports were signed by a different medical examiner than the most recent one.
Good work, Scully.
And Mulder compliments her attention to detail, and this is the first pass for Scully. She has proven that she has the smarts to do detective work.
Yeah, she has passed his test for sure.
Yeah, she's beginning to earn his respect.
Yeah.
Test number 2, suddenly the car radio starts going nuts, changing stations randomly without anybody touching the dials. The clock starts cycling, the digital clock starts cycling numbers rapidly. Mulder stops the car, spray paints a red X on the road, and Scully, very confused, is like, what was that all about? And he says, probably nothing. This is, I wouldn't say it's quite a fail, but this is an expression that Mulder doesn't fully trust Scully enough to let her in on what he's thinking, on his process yet.
Oh, that's a good point.
Test number 3, they reach the cemetery. The county medical examiner shows up and accosts Mulder and Scully as they are approaching the site where one of the victims, Ray Soames, is being exhumed from his burial site.
On the order of Mulder.
On Mulder's order, yes. And he is very defensive about this.
Guilty from the moment he's on screen. You're like, okay, that guy's a bad guy.
You're aware of the tissue sample that was taken from the girl's body?
What is the insinuation here? Are you saying that I missed something in those other kids' exams?
We're not insinuating anything, sir.
Wait a minute. See, well, I think you are. And if you're making an accusation, then you'd better have something to back it up.
And then the man's daughter in the passenger seat of the car says, Daddy, can we please just go? Let's just go. Now remember this girl, because we're going to see her again. So as the third victim of the previous 3 killings, Ray Soames, is being exhumed, Scully explains that he had escaped from a mental hospital. Cause of death was listed as exposure. And Mueller finds that puzzling because he was missing for 7 hours on a warm night in July. So how does a strong 20-year-old boy die of exposure on a warm night in Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
The nylon strap being used to hoist the coffin snaps. The coffin tumbles down the hill, smashes into a tombstone, breaks open, and we see that the body doesn't appear to be entirely human. There's something very wrong with this corpse. The arms are elongated. The hands are swollen or oversized. The head is distorted.
This is the establishment of a great element of the whole series, which is weird alien corpses. And you know, it's like the shark in Jaws. You only see it for, I think, 2.5 seconds in that first scene. It's just enough to make you go, oh, what is that thing?
Yeah, you immediately recognize it as probably not human, but you don't get a good enough look at it to be able to say exactly what it is.
Right.
And similar with Scully and Mulder. Later on in an examination room, Mulder's snapping photos like wild, and Scully is performing a medical examination. She says the features on the corpse suggest the deceased is definitely not human, but she thinks maybe it's a chimpanzee.
Yeah.
And Mulder wants to know, okay, well, fine, so maybe it's not an alien, but why is a chimpanzee buried in this kid's coffin? And he orders a whole workup. I want blood, I want x-rays, I want a full genetic makeup, I want everything.
Without insurance, that would be roughly $400,000 worth of diagnostic work.
Right. An x-ray then reveals an unidentified object that has been shoved up into the subject's nasal cavity, not navel cavity.
Ow.
So this is a pass because they have discovered major clues that something is very wrong in Denmark. All right, test number 4. Mulder and Scully meet a doctor at the psychiatric hospital. This is the one that you've identified as an ally because he provides good intel to the agents without blocking. He says that he was Ray Soames's psychiatrist while Ray was a patient at the psychiatric hospital, and that he is also treating 2 other classmates, a Billy Miles and a Peggy Odell. Of course, Mully and Sculder. Yep, I'm going to do that a couple more times this episode.
I've been so close to saying that multiple times already.
Mulder and Scully are, of course, very interested to speak to these 2 kids. And unfortunately, the doctor tells them that Billy Miles is comatose. They were in a car accident 4 years ago. Peggy Odell, who is sitting next to Billy reading a book to him, is wheelchair bound, presumably due to injuries sustained in this horrific car accident 4 years ago. When Mulder, though, asks if he can do a medical exam on Peggy, she starts flipping out.
Yeah.
Screaming, flailing. Her nose starts bleeding. She collapses to the ground out of her wheelchair, and Mulder sees on her back the same 2 pustules that they saw on the body of Karen Swenson.
The guest stars in this show are so well written. That nurse has such a gallows humor. She calls them vegetables, and she says she works in the produce section. She is not a good nurse.
Zero bedside manner.
Yeah, but that's how she deals with it, I guess, is by making, dehumanizing the patients.
Yeah, and she flirts with Mulder quite a bit, too. Yeah. I saw that as the last test. They get more clues. They get deeper into the conspiracy.
Okay, so you're drawing the line a little bit earlier than I had one more test, and then I'll wrap into Approach the Inmost Cave. So when they walk out of the hospital, Scully is freaked out.
Yeah, she storms out of the hospital.
What is going on here? What do you know about those marks? What are they?
Why, so you can put it down in your little report? I don't think you're ready for what I think.
I'm here to solve this case, Mulder. I want the truth.
The truth? I think those kids have been abducted.
And I think this is a test for Mulder. It's a test for both of them. It's a test for Mulder because he has to kind of decide in this moment how much he's going to let her in, because they're about to start going in. Well, maybe this does make it more of part of the approach. All right, I'm just going to go to the approach to the inmost cave. The hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of their quest is hidden. So yeah, I just talked myself into agreeing with you. He's about to enter the core part of this investigation. He has to decide if he's going to let her in on that, or if he's going to try to ditch her somehow, because he suspects that what they're about to see, what they're about to get into, is a kind of a point of no return. He says to her, "I don't think you're ready for what I think. I think the kids were abducted." And she says, "That's crazy. There has to be another explanation." So now the line between faith and skepticism has been drawn in the sand. Speaking of sand, they head to the forest where the victim was last found, and Mulder's compass goes haywire. Scully finds a weird sandy substance on the ground and puts some of it in her pocket. It's a very scientific sample collection. Very nice, Dana.
Yeah, not contaminated now at all.
And then they get separated because, first of all, you always have to go to the forest at night. There's never daytime hours when you go to the crime scene. It always has to be at night, and you always have to get separated.
It's too crowded. The forest is just crowded with thousands of tourists.
Squirrels and, yeah.
You can't get your work done.
Yeah, it's true. So they get separated. Scully hears a mechanical humming sound. I know that's what it was because the closed caption said, bracket, mechanical humming on bracket. And calls out to Mulder, but he doesn't answer. And so she knows something's going on. So she draws her gun and goes to investigate. And there's a blindingly bright light at the top of the ridge, just like in the teaser, and a male figure approaches, reminiscent of that male figure in the teaser. What'd I say?
Teacher,
yes, in the teacher. And Scully calls out Mulder, but it's not Mulder. It's Detective Miles with a shotgun. And he says, "Drive away or I'll arrest you." This is technically the scene of the crime and the scene of potential future crimes, which is not just the edge of a dangerous place, but the dangerous place itself. But they only get to the edge because Detective Miles is a threshold guardian barring their way.
Yes.
Eventually, Scully and Mulder lower their guns and drive away. Because what are they going to do? Shoot the sheriff? Because they didn't shoot the deputy.
Oh,
they
you
did
beat me
shoot
to
the
it.
deputy,
You beat me to
but
it.
they didn't shoot the sheriff.
You
So
planned that. You planned that.
I
you
didn't
so-and-so.
actually. That came out naturally. That's where I drew the line for the end of the approach.
All right, next segment of the hero's journey is the ordeal, where the hero faces a central crisis, sometimes actually appearing to die. As Mulder and Scully drive away, torrential downpour begins. Scully reveals to Mulder the soil sample that she took. Mulder wonders if it's from a fire or something. Scully suggests that maybe the kids are involved in some kind of a weird cult, and the sheriff knows something about it. Mulder checks his watch. It is 9:03 p.m. And then his compass starts spinning wildly again. A bright light flashes. The car loses power, rolls to a stop. Mulder now looks at his watch. It reads 9:12 p.m. They've just lost 9 minutes in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
They exit the car in the pouring rain. Baptism. And Mulder shows Scully that the car came to a stop right before the big red X that he painted on the road earlier, and he is ecstatic.
Yeah.
He is thrilled. He says people who claim UFO sightings have reported time loss. And Scully says that's not possible. They're arguing here in the rain. Time just doesn't disappear. It's a universal invariable. And Mulder says, not in this zip code.
That's such a great line.
He chews on that line. I absolutely love it. And then the car turns itself back on. Back at the motel, Scully is writing her report on her laptop. The power goes out, so she decides to take a candlelight bath. And as she is disrobing, she feels bumps on her lower back. Rushes to Mulder's hotel room, shows him, and we see for the first time there are 3 marks instead of the 2. So far, every time we've seen any of these characters with these bumps, there's 2. She's got 3. He smiles and says, they're just mosquito bites. You're fine. I got eaten alive out there in the forest too. They're just mosquito bites. And she collapses into his arms, relieved. Of course, part of the hero appearing to die in this segment is the loss of time. And Scully thinking that she has been abducted now and has these bumps on her back as a result of that event. That is why I have these sequences as ordeal.
We also see a really great arc for Scully here. She finds that sand, and instead of thinking, oh, it's a campfire or, some other normal, it must be the occult. So she's already edging toward the creepy side of things instead of the more commonplace, normal example that it might be. Like, oh, it couldn't be a campfire. It had to be they were burning animals. It was a sacrifice. So I love that. I love that she leans in there. It's so great. The scene, so a couple of things. One, the power goes out at the motel, right? But it's okay because Scully uses the provided Victorian candle that apparently comes with this motel room. It's like a full-on hurricane candle. Now, I've stayed in hotels in Oregon, and I can testify they did not come with Victorian candles. And then the other thing is, so she goes into the bathroom, and it's kind of an obligatory underwear scene because she's getting undressed for the shower because that has to happen. And she has this like silky red robe. And I'm like, there's no way that's the motel robe. Does she pack a bathrobe when she travels? She packs a bathrobe. That's a character choice for Scully, that she packs a kind of like sexy red bathrobe when she travels. But it's not even like a bathrobe. It was like a satiny kind of like, it was kind of a sexy robe. Anyway, so.
Okay, you're letting your crush on Gillian Anderson show through here.
Well, I mean, there's for sure some of that, but there's also, you go back to the 90s and prior, all female characters on TV were sexualized. David Duchovny doesn't have an underwear, whatever. So when she goes into, that's right, it happens later. When she goes into, but I mean, like, look at even like, they got a little bit more egalitarian when streaming shows came out. Like, when you watch Game of Thrones, in the first few episodes, there's every kind of nudity, and then it tapers off. So when she goes to Mulder's room to have him check, he kneels down behind her, and he's very close with this candle, and they're candlelit, and his face is close to her, half-naked body, and it's a very intimate moment. She is making herself incredibly vulnerable to him. And so let's get to reward, the ultimate boon. Having faced their worst fear, the hero seizes the object of their quest. We get not a campfire scene, but a candlelight scene. So this new intimacy and trust has been established. Scully has made herself vulnerable, and she's trusted him. Now it's Mulder's turn to get naked emotionally. Before, he was very suspicious, even paranoid about Scully being a spy. But now that they've lived through this ordeal together, she has earned more trust, and he bears his soul. He tells her about his sister's abduction when he was 12 and she was 8. She disappeared out of her bed, and there was no note, no phone calls, no evidence of anything, and it tore the family apart. And then he explains later he went to Oxford, and he came back and got recruited by the FBI, and he had some success, and then he began to pursue the X-Files. This is such a great, important moment because Mulder's drive to pursue the X-Files isn't just curiosity. He's trying to find his sister. And this is a long arc of this show. So he gets obsessed. He reads everything. And then he says, in the most vulnerable moment of trust, I'm trying to get access to classified info, but someone at a higher level of power is blocking my access. And the only reason I've been able to do this work is because I made friends in Congress. And he says, but you're part of that agenda. You're part of that agenda that's trying to stop me. And she insists she isn't. It's interesting because she suspects that that's why she's been sent here. And so even in the first scene, she says, are you asking me to debunk the X-Files? And so it's not like she's lying, but it keeps the tension going that she won't admit, yeah, they sent me here to try and debunk you. So it's an interesting scene. She's not being totally upfront with him So they keep, even though they trust each other more now, that they're keeping that tension going, which is smart. You don't want to resolve something like that in the first episode of a show. Right. But then he warns her, I've got to tell you this because of what you've seen. What's implied is you're now in danger. You're now on the wrong side of this as far as the government's concerned. So he tells her that under hypnosis, he like regressed and remembered his memories of the night his sister was abducted, and he remembers a bright light outside and a presence in the room, and he was paralyzed. And he says, this thing exists, the government knows about it, and I have to know what they're protecting. Nothing else matters to me, and this is the closest I've gotten to it. That whole revelation is a reward. They are trusting each other now, and now they're, well, at least in the case of Mulder, he's awarding our hero, Scully, information she has earned by living through this series of supernatural events and being willing to consider. In showing him the marks on her back, she's saying, I believe this is possible now. I'm afraid it just happened to me. But in a show like this, you can't just have they go out to the bar and celebrate. You have to move the story forward. And it's a great moment to use this reward segment to sort of peel back the layer of Mulder's life and what's really driving him. It's really good writing. It's really good writing.
Well, I think it is time for us to head over to the Vogler Lounge.
I'm going to get my tall motel-provided candle and the sexy red robe that I packed.
Okay. Let's see if we have found some appropriate themed beverages for the X-Files. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vogler Lounge, where we take a break from the journey and enjoy an adult beverage, hopefully themed to our current project. We're talking about the X-Files pilot episode. Jeff, what have you discovered?
I poked around for cocktails, and I found a blog called Domestic Geek Girl.
Okay.
It was a very cool blog about home, family life, crafts, and geekery. The woman who runs this blog and her husband did a rewatch of the X-Files in 2016, and she decided to invent some themed beverages for some of the episodes. Huh. And for the pilot episode, she came up with a cocktail called the Spooky Mulder. This is her take on Dark and Stormy. This is 4 ounces of ginger beer, 2 tablespoons of freshly squeezed lemon juice. Oh, I forgot the bitters. Stand by.
Oh, you're not going to put that in now, are you?
Oh, God. I'm coming back for the bitters. Nope.
It's got to make a new one.
That is a very Jeff thing to do, to leave out one ingredient. So, half a cup of ginger beer, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 3 tablespoons of rum. I used dark navy rum, and then 5 to 6 dashes of bitters. It didn't say to garnish it with a lemon slice, but I still rarely cut up fresh lemons that I decided to do that. So the rum is like a floater. So it's like half a cup of sort of light-colored, lemonade-y looking stuff, and then a gradient of sort of rum as you get darker to the top.
Yeah, I noticed that. It looks neat.
I smell rum and lemon, not a surprise. I smell a little bit of that ginger too. So I can it's quite a complex aroma profile. What do you call it? The smell, the nose. All right, here we go. Ooh, that's almost like a tiki drink. That is very refreshing.
Huh.
In a hot Oregon summer, when the mosquitoes are biting and the aliens are abducting, I can see sitting in the forest at night, taking a nice cold sip of my spooky Mulder. That's awesome. I'll post a link to her blog and that recipe on the website, on the show notes page on the website. Well done, Domestic Geek Girl. Really enjoyed that. Dan, what beverage have you selected for this pilot episode?
I, as I so often do, perused the wine section of my local store, and I found a 2020 Cabernet blend from Paso Robles called True Myth.
Ooh.
It is... Man, I've got multiple different lights around me.
It looks pretty
opaque.
Opaque, yeah.
Opaque. This is I should probably break down all the stuff. This is a 2020 vintage, 14.5% alcohol by volume, aged in new French and American oak barrels for 15 to 18 months.
Ooh.
And this is a blend. Though the bottle says Cabernet Sauvignon, this is a blend. It is 85% Cabernet Sauvignon, 10% Syrah, and 5% Petite Syrah. So I am expecting a very chewy, bold, tannic red wine. The May-June 2023 issue of Tasting Panel magazine gave this 94 points.
Oh, geez.
Pretty good.
I thought you'd go for an Oregon wine.
If I didn't find anything appropriate name-wise, I was definitely going to go for an Oregon. That was going to be my Hail Mary. Oh, yeah. That just dried my tongue right out. Very tannic. Fruity, but tannic. I was expecting something jammy, and it is not. I'm trying to get some other notes here. They suggest hints of pepper and mocha, and I think I'm getting the pepper, but I'm not mocha. I kind of feel like Thomas Hayden Church right now, where he's like,
strawberries, yeah.
Good.
Strawberries.
Yeah.
Not the cheese.
I'm trying to decide if it's... Oh, yeah. It's pretty acidic, too. It's making me... That is weird. It's drying out my tongue, but it's acidic, so it's making my mouth water.
So what is jammy? What does that mean?
Imagine the sensation of taking a spoonful of grape jam.
Oh, so like texture?
No. Oh, God, not texture.
The sweetness? That'd be bad. The sweetness of it? Okay.
The flavor, the sweetness, just super sugary and fruity like jam is.
So you expected it to be more like that, but it's drier and...
Yes. The Syrah... Yeah, all three of these grapes are real bold red. So this is good, though. I'm super enjoying it. I do have a bit of congestion, so I'm not trusting my nose right now. But here's what Tasting Panel had to say in the late spring, early summer of 2023 in their 94-point review. Succulent notes of wild strawberry. Okay, strawberry. Not the cheese. And here's where it gets a little pretentious. Succulent notes of wild strawberry in a bed of sweet soil. I don't go around eating soil, so I don't know that I've ever had sweet soil before. I'm assuming it's the smell. When you smell gardening soil, there's a real earthy, very pleasant. I enjoy the smell of gardening soil. So
maybe that's what Scully found in the forest.
That's what
was sweet soil, a bed of sweet.
That is it. Yeah, that is it. So in a bed of sweet soil appear in this wine's perfume as well as on its juicy entry. So that line may have come right out of Judy Blume's novel In the Unlikely Events. Dark chocolate covered cherry adds opulence. The tannins are round and well structured. And the wine's ripeness persists through the long-lasting, expressive finish.
Yeah,
that was Tasting Panel, May, June 2023, in their 94-point review.
Oh, God, I'm going to have a heart attack.
Are you all right?
That was strong, man. That was strong. Oh, I'm a little lightheaded. Woo!
I am enjoying it. And it's not expensive either. The suggested retail price on their website is like $25. I got it for 16 and change at the grocery store using my Vons member card. Yeah.
I think I still have a Vons member card from when I lived in the Valley, keyed to my very same cell phone.
Yeah, I'm an economical grocery shopper.
Although when I lived there,
coupon clipper.
The Vons turned into a John's. There's a grocery store chain in LA called John's, and it's literally they would buy a Vons that wasn't doing well and swap the V out for a J. And you could literally drive by and see like the shadow of where the V had been because the sun beat down. And it's like the laziest rebranding ever.
And the red of the J was brighter than the Ons because the Ons was sun bleached. And the J was a brand new panel of red.
Having shopped there in my early 20s when I had no money, I can tell you that I think they just kept the canned goods that were in stock at Vons. when they bought the store as well. Oh, boy.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
We're not here to trash third-party grocery store chains. Let's bring our drinks back to the studio, and we will continue Act 3 of the X-Files pilot episode. Act 3 of the hero's journey begins with the road back. The hero is pursued by vengeful forces disturbed when they seized the object of their quest. Mulder and Scully are still in Mulder's motel room. They have just finished their heart-to-heart chat, and the phone rings.
Hello? What? Who is this? Who is it? That was some woman. It just said Peggy Odell was dead.
The girl in the wheelchair?
The two agents race to the scene. On a highway, a body is covered by a blanket, and a big rig driver tells Mulder that the girl just ran out in front of his truck. And Mulder, remembering that Peggy Odell was wheelchair bound the last time he saw her, says she was running?
Right.
Scully, being a licensed physician, is looking at the body, and she notices that the girl's watch stopped at 9:03 p.m. Remember, this is the same time that Scully and Mulder were hit by the bright light that stole 9 minutes from them.
Had she been wearing an Apple Watch, that clue would have not been there. More technology ruining clues in mysteries.
That is right. You got to have an analog watch for it to stop like that. Mulder then tells Scully that someone trashed the autopsy in the lab, stole the mysterious corpse that was supposed to be Ray Soames. They get in the car, race back to their motel, which they find engulfed in flames.
Yeah. Talk about vengeful forces.
Right. Scully's computer, the x-rays and photographs, all gone. And then the medical examiner's daughter, Teresa Nemmons, approaches them and pretty much begs for their protection. They take her to a very public place where, of course, you would take anybody who's begging for protection.
Yeah, they take her to the donut shop diner restaurant.
It's like a Dairy Queen or something. I don't know.
It's a big Dairy Queen. That's a lot of tables in there, man.
And she tells them that since the summer that she and all of her friends graduated from high school, this was 4 years ago, she will sometimes just find herself in the woods. She doesn't know how she got there, and it's been happening to her friends too. And she reveals that she also has the marks on her lower back and is afraid she's going to die next, just like Peggy Odell did.
Mm-hmm. And
then her nose begins to gush blood. Like someone just opened the valve and splutch.
Yeah, it's like what causes it to bleed at that moment other than just convenience for the plot?
Well, I think they, quote unquote, made it happen.
They're trying to stop her from talking?
Yes, exactly.
By giving her a bloody nose?
Yes. They're punishing her.
Yeah.
She is exposing information to people that can cause problems.
They're like, you going to talk? We're going to ruin your pajamas.
It's at that moment that Dr. Nemon, the medical examiner, arrives with the sheriff, who is revealed at that moment to be Detective Miles, Billy Miles' father. They take Teresa away, and Detective Miles orders Mulder to stay away from his son.
Mm-hmm.
As the agents leave the Dairy Queen Waffle House IHOP, Scully tells Mulder that she thinks Dr. Nemon has lied on all of the other autopsy reports.
Yeah.
Which leads Mulder to wonder, what is in the other two graves?
Be-ba-ba-ba.
So it begins raining again as Scully and Mulder arrive at the cemetery only to find that the other two graves have already been dug up and the corpses are missing. And in what I thought was just like the biggest stretch so far of the show, Mulder reveals to Scully that he thinks that Billy Miles is the one who has been doing all of this. Scully, the skeptical one, says, how is a kid who's been in a coma for 4 years getting up and killing people and digging up graves and setting fire to their hotel?
I think he makes that connection because I had the same reaction. Like, what? How? Okay, connect the dots for me.
Where did this come from? Yeah.
I think the only logical fact is that because Detective Miles was the one keeping them from looking at the crime scene, and then he just found out that that's Billy Miles' dad, that he says, okay, he must be protecting his son.
Yes.
That's like the only dots to connect. But that's still quite a leap there. But then Mulder makes lots of leaps past logic through intuition. So
That's the reason the kids come to the forest, because the forest controls them, summons them there. And the marks are from some kind of test that's being done on them. And that maybe causes some kind of genetic mutation, which would explain the body that we dug up.
And the Force summoned Teresa Nemon's body into the woods tonight.
Yes, but it was Billy Miles who took her there. Summoned by some alien impulse. That's it.
And we are seeing his revelations through Scully's eyes.
mm-hmm.
They make absolutely no sense to her.
Right.
And they make absolutely no sense to us, because where are you getting this? Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
But again, he has all this knowledge because, as he told Scully in the motel room, that he has read hundreds of X-Files.
Right.
He is noticing patterns, probably. He says to Scully, this all fits the profile of alien abduction. She clearly thinks this is ludicrous. She's like, this fits the profile? Like, what are you talking about?
And she's laughing.
And
manically.
yeah,
She's
and they
having
start
a
laughing.
breakdown.
She can't. She's like, is this really what we're going with?
Yeah.
And they both start laughing. So what I saw is the end of the road back. Mulder and Scully visit Billy Miles in the psychiatric hospital. And as Mulder is talking with this nurse, Scully examines Billy Miles' feet, and they are dirty. Not just dirty as though he's been walking barefoot on a hospital floor. They're filthy. This kid has been outside. And they return to the forest to take another sample of the dirt to try to compare it to the dirt on Billy Miles' feet. Because as Mulder says, the original sample has been destroyed in the fire, so you're going to have to put this on your report. So you'd better make sure that these two things match. I mean, this is Mulder telling Scully, and he says it earlier in the episode too. He says, I'm not crazy. I have the same doubts you do.
Right.
He's just more open to possibility. So they head to the forest to take another sample. That's the end of the road back.
That leads us to resurrection. The hero faces death one more time in an ordeal, battle, or showdown. This time the danger is on the broadest scale of the entire story. They return to the forest, take another sample at night. When they arrive, the detective's car is already there, parked on the side of the road, and Mulder's kind of looking inside with a flashlight, and then they hear a scream from the woods, and they run toward it. Somebody clonks Scully on the noggin as she's running by, knocking her down. And she looks up, and it's Detective Miles. And he says, I told you to stay out of this. Then he gets Mulder at shotgun point too. And Mulder says, you know it was Billy. You've known it all along. How much longer are you going to let it happen? Detective Miles's face is conflicted. And then we hear another scream, and Mulder says, he's going to kill her. And it seems like he finally gets through because the detective turns and runs up and over the ridge. And there he sees Billy, shirtless for some reason, holding the limp form of Teresa Nemon. And the detective screams, Billy, no, let her go, leave her alone. And then he levels the shotgun at his son.
Right. Yes.
After all this time, he has to know something is happening. So that confused me. Like, he's going to shoot his kid. Mulder tackles him, and the shot goes wild. And they watch as Billy picks up Teresa and stands in the middle of the leaf whirlwind, which is forming again.
Yep.
And Mulder sees that Billy has the marks on the lower back. So a bright light from above blinds everyone and whites out the screen. When it fades down again, we see Teresa on the ground. She's still alive, and Billy is standing next to her. And he looks over and sees Detective Miles and says, Dad. So his catatonia is broken, and they embrace. And Mulder looks again and sees that Billy's marks are gone, with no sign that they were ever there.
Yeah, there's not even like a scar.
No skincare routine could account for the sudden disappearance of those marks. So Mulder finds Scully, and she says, Mulder, what happened? There was a light. And he replies, it was incredible. I watched that exchange a couple times because it was so vague. It didn't wrap anything up. It didn't answer any questions, except you get the sense that Mulder, and that in that moment, he is more entranced by the wonder of what he's just seen. It's almost like the investigation is secondary. He's just like, I just saw an incredible thing.
Yeah.
And Scully didn't, it's the thing Scully didn't bear witness to. So,
which gives her a level of plausible deniability. I did not personally witness this event, which comes into her report later.
So it's interesting because we see the world through Scully's eyes, but this was really the biggest moment where we see something Scully doesn't see. And it's an interesting tension now between the point of view of the character and the point of view of the audience, because we know something supernatural just happened.
Yes.
There really isn't any other explanation for those marks disappearing. And so now we're almost a little more on Mulder's side than we were at the beginning of the episode. So it's just an interesting narrative point where we diverge from the hero's journey and we get a reward that our hero does not.
And that brings us to the final segment of the hero's journey, the return with the elixir. The hero, having won a precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. Agents Mulder and Scully have brought Billy Miles to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. We get a title card that informs us it is now March 22nd, 1992. And under hypnosis, Billy Miles is recounting the series of events. He first saw the light in the forest. He and his friends were having a party to celebrate their high school graduation. The light came, took him away to, quote, the testing place, and he was told to gather the others so that they could do tests. They put something in his head, and he points between his brows, right about where Ray Soames' implant was.
Mm-hmm.
And the interviewer asks who they are, who was giving him orders. And Billy says simply, the light.
But we also know that that's something Mulder witnessed when his sister was abducted. So the presence of this bright light is a recurring, yeah.
But Billy then says that the test didn't work. They wanted everything destroyed, and they were leaving. But Billy is afraid they're coming back. During this conversation, the camera is passing around this interrogation room. And we see that Mulder is inside the interrogation room with Billy Miles.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a one-way... Actually, you know what? I'm not sure if it's a one-way mirror, a one-way window. Scully is on the other side of it. And the reason I'm saying I don't know if that it's a one-way mirror rather than just a simple window is because at the end of the scene, Scully and Mulder make eye contact.
Yeah, I noticed that too, but we do see it from inside the interrogation room, and it is reflecting the room.
It is? Okay, I missed that.
He must know she's back there, but yeah.
Yeah, he must instinctively... Oh, there we go. That establishes a real connection between the two, where he senses where she is on the other side of that one-way mirror, and they make eye contact without actually making eye contact. We also see the cigarette-smoking man, who we've seen 3 times, or we see 3 times during the episode, not a single line of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
He is a silent, mysterious entity.
More about that in the tidbits. If you'd like to hear more bonus audio content, go to patreon.com/heroesjourneypodcast for more.
When Billy Miles says, "I'm afraid they're coming back," the cigarette-smoking man leans over to another man, whispers something, and they leave in a hurry. Afterwards, Scully speaks with Chief Blevins and the other man, who I feel sad calling him the other man. He was the other guy sitting at the desk at the beginning of the episode who was interviewing Agent Scully. I don't think he ever had a character name. I looked in IMDb and the cast list. I didn't see him even represented, so I don't know who this gentleman was. Some kind of a deputy of, deputy director of some kind, I imagine. But anyway, they are questioning Agent Scully's claims. She has obviously delivered her report on the case. And Scully says, I cannot substantiate anything that I've said in my report.
Right.
And so they're calling everything into question. Chief Blevins says, "You have no physical evidence." And then she stands up, reaches into her pocket, and pulls out the little glass vial that has the implant that she pulled out of Ray Soames. She's been keeping it in her pocket all this time. And she says, "I tested this, and the material cannot be identified. It is not made out of anything found on Earth."
Did she say that? Did she say it's not made of anything on Earth?
No, but that's the implication, right? And so Blevins says, "Well, what does Mulder think?"
Agent Mulder believes we are not alone.
Thank you, Agent Scully. That'll be all.
As she leaves, Scully passes cigarette-smoking man in the hallway. He walks right past her, doesn't even look at her, completely dismisses her, and enters Chief Blevins' office and closes the door behind him. Now we cut to a vision of a clock. It is 11:21, changes to 11:22. Scully is lying in bed. She can't sleep. The phone rings. It's Mulder. He can't sleep either. He talked to the DA's office in Raymond County, Oregon. There's no case file on Billy Miles. The paperwork they filed is gone. They need to talk. And she says, "Yes, okay, but tomorrow." Now we cut to a mysterious storage room that is reminiscent of the warehouse at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I wrote the same thing.
And we see the smoking man place the implant Scully pulled out of Ray Soames into a box, slide the box into a shelf among thousands of others that look just like it. He exits the room, closes and secures the large metal door, and the sign on the door identifies the building as the Pentagon. End credits roll. It's a great conclusion because we've all seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. We know that, that scene is obviously an homage to Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, here's all the stuff they know about that they have that we'll never see. All the evidence, the preponderance of proof of all the things that Mulder probably believes. Maybe there's explanations for it in that room.
Yep, and it's all being suppressed. So really, with more questions now than answers, the episode ends, but the X-Files continues. Jeff, the truth is out there. Listeners and patrons, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Hero's Journey podcast. Please share us with your friends and your family. Word of mouth remains the greatest way that you can support this podcast that you enjoy and keep it going.
If you are listening to this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That helps us find new people. Whatever podcast app you're listening to, if there's the possibility to rate and review us, please do that. That's the only way that random people can find our podcast, is when you like it or review it, and it bumps us up in the magical algorithm. You can also find The Hero's Journey on Audible, as well as all other major podcast distributors. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please go to patreon.com/Hero's Journey Podcast. We have a bunch of tiers with really cool benefits like bonus audio, the ability to vote on the subject of each episode, and having your name read at the end of every episode of the podcast so that everyone knows what a badass you are.
Speaking of which, thank you to all patrons who make the show possible, including our demigod patrons that Jeff just referenced: John Peterson Jr., Scott Sanford, Ricky Garvin, Jeff Scott, Joseph Wilbur, Michelle Calderon, Ami Garvin, Salathiel Jones, Jasmine and Pete Hudson, Mike and Susie Zarzana, Randy Sparks, and our newest demigod patron, Brad Gustafson.
Welcome to Demigod Brad. Thank you so much. And special thanks to Taylor Jordan for composing our theme music. And thanks to Jason Dorff for our awesome episode artwork. We love being characters from movies. Links, right? It's kind of fun.
So, which one of us is Scully this episode? You always want to be the female character for some reason. I don't understand that.
Yeah, my psychiatrist doesn't understand it either. I don't know why. Some things should be left unexamined. Links to their portfolios can be found on the About page at heroesjourneypodcast.com. The trademark Hero's Journey is used under license from the Joseph Campbell Foundation. Visit www.jcf.org to learn about how the foundation promotes and celebrates the work of Joseph Campbell.
The X-Files is copyright 20th Century Fox Film Corporation. Thanks again for listening. Until next time,
journey on.
Do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials?